What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson, and mock draft season is here. The NFL draft is right around the corner, and a lot of analysts, fans alike, have the New York Giants going with wide receiver in the first round, cornerback, center. We want to discuss the possibility of the Giants trading down in the first round of this year's draft, potentially taking an early pick in round 2 and seeing what kind of added value they can get from moving down in the draft and what kind of talents they could target early in round 2 to kind of make up for that loss of not taking a player in the first round. There's a lot of players that come to mind for me specifically, a few prospects, maybe at the cornerback spot, maybe at the center spot. Again, two of the Giants' biggest needs, but I can imagine a scenario where the Giants are sitting there with the 25th overall pick, hoping to see one of the top wide receivers fall into their lap, but it doesn't happen. And if that's the case, they might really want to consider moving down, gaining some extra picks in the middle rounds of this year's draft, because as we all know, the draft is a crapshoot. If you have more darts to throw at the board, eventually one of them's going to hit a bullseye, and that's kind of the whole idea for the New York Giants. You want to move down in the draft at certain times. I mean, if you guys remember last year, they moved down twice in the second round and ended up landing a really talented player in that regard. So moving down, trading up, trading down. We know Joe Shane is very happy to be aggressive to get the players that he wants and to add more draft picks. So let's go ahead and discuss a couple scenarios that we could envision for the New York Giants trading down from the first round. But before we dive into all of that, make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy this episode and comment your thoughts on the topic down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, make sure to leave us a 5-star review. But without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And what are your thoughts on the potential of the New York Giants trading down in the first round?
I am doing fantastic midweek, and we got some good sports today. I know Anthony's excited about Napoli playing in the Champions League. We got the Knicks playoff games, game 2 tonight against the Cavs at MSG. It's going to be hype. The Yankees played tonight. The Giants are back on voluntary training. Things are in motion, my friends. Sports are back. We got everything going, and the Rangers even in the playoffs against the New Jersey Devils. Pretty hype. So there's a lot going on. We're excited about it. I know you guys are too. And the Giants, the draft next week, going to be exciting. I kind of developed this really intricate mock draft for the first 2 rounds. It's pretty out there. And for what it's worth, the draft never goes how we think it's going to go. There has probably been one time that we've ever really hit on it. And it was probably last year when everybody knew we were going after Kayvon Thibodeau and Evan Neal. And it worked out in our favor, and it worked out exactly as we wanted. But the mid to late rounds are always a huge question mark. So I want to discuss this year's draft because we performed a lot better last year than we anticipated. We ended up with the 25th overall pick. And later on in the first round, everything just becomes like a what if. Like, what is this guy going to do? Is he going to be an NFL caliber talent? Is he going to live up to the expectations? The talent drop off from 15 after 15 is pretty significant. So the Giants have an opportunity here to say, maybe we trade back. Maybe we move back and gather more draft assets and more draft capital to go after other players. But I had an interesting concept because we talked about John Michael Schmitz a couple days ago. And personally, I'm not a proponent of drafting centers in the first round. People will reference Tyler Linderbaum. If you like a player, draft him in the first round. That's totally fine. There's a couple of good centers in this draft class, though, that could be had in the second. But John Michael Schmitz is being mocked outside of the first round among most simulators. So, again, he could go in the first round. Totally possible. But a lot of sims have been going from the 35 to 45 range. So I was thinking to myself, why not devise a plan and strategy here to figure out how the Giants can land John Michael Schmitz without using the 25th pick on him and getting some more draft capital in the meantime and finding themselves another first-round talent, 2 guys that can make an immediate impact right now. Because 57th overall pick, yes, you can get a starting level player there, but it may come with some developmental time. If you can get 2 starters in the first 35 picks of the draft, first 40 picks of the draft, you're probably getting guys that are going to make an impact as rookies immediately and starting at that. So I wanted to kind of develop a mock draft. Now, Anthony's going to kind of chime in, give his take on some of these moves, give his take on some of these concepts, and I'm always happy to hear your perspectives below in the YouTube comments as always, because it's going to be a really interesting mock draft. It's going to be busy. There's going to be some moving ups, some moving downs, and I think that this ultimately can land us 2 very good draft picks and guys that can help us immediately at 2 key positions, center and cornerback, or even receiver, depending on how this draft ends up kind of unfolding and how the board lands in our lap. But Anthony, I'll let you take it away in terms of the idea behind trading back in the first round from 25 and kind of how I put together this Pittsburgh Steelers moving sequence that's kind of interesting.
Yes, it's definitely an interesting scenario that you cooked up the other day in an article over at Empire Sports Media, but I will try to break it down to the best of my abilities, and you give your input if I get any of the details of your intricate trade incorrect. But you have the Giants moving down from 25 to 32 with the Pittsburgh Steelers, giving up as well picks 160 and 172 to give away to the Steelers for also pick 80. So the Giants would then no longer have the 25th overall pick, instead have the 32nd overall pick and the 80th overall pick. Now, with the first pick in the second round, again, keep in mind, everybody, the 32nd overall pick this year is not the last pick of the first round. This is the first pick of the second round because the Miami Dolphins were tampering and they lost their first round pick because of it. So with that 32nd overall pick, Alex has the New York Giants taking a cornerback in Emmanuel Forbes. Now, when I'm looking at the kind of idea here behind your mock draft, Alex, which is the main purpose being, let's land John Michael Schmitz, but let's not land him at 25. So you skip on him at 32, and then you make a second trade. You move up from 57 to get into the early part of the second round, and that's where you land John Michael Schmitz at number 37, I believe it was, overall, pick 37 overall, giving up picks 57 and the 80 that you got in the Steelers trade. Now you landed Emmanuel Forbes, cornerback, with 32, and John Michael Schmitz, 37. I think a lot of Giants fans are going to love the sound of that. I think that is definitely an exciting way to address two of the Giants' top needs, cornerback and center. Me personally, not a fan of Emmanuel Forbes. I don't view him as a scheme fit. I don't view him as a size fit. 166 pounds, the guy is a twig. Now, don't get me wrong. He's insanely talented. He's a very aggressive ball hawk of a player, but that's not necessarily a fit for the Giants' cover 3 zone press man defense. That's kind of the stuff that they run. Emmanuel Forbes played in pretty much exclusively a quarters defense, playing that cover 4. That's his zone. That's how he likes to play. He's got to go to a team that plays that. Otherwise, he's going to struggle immensely in year one. And I don't think that the Giants are in a position to get a developmental cornerback. I think that they need to get someone who's a little bit more day one ready. Personally, I think there's a lot of talent over at that 32nd overall pick when you look at it, not only at the cornerback spot, but another position that I think a lot of Giants fans want to hear about is wide receiver. And a name that I want to throw out here, not necessarily a player that I'm super high on. I think I'm lower on him the most, but I do think he's worthy of a second round pick, and that is Jalen Hyatt out of Tennessee. Now, the way that I look at Jalen Hyatt, I think that he is legitimately Deshaun Jackson 2.0. He's about 6 feet tall, which is what Deshaun Jackson was, and I know no one wants to hear that name. It's like the name that we should never say, he who should not be named, Deshaun Jackson. I get it. I hate him. He's like literally my least favorite NFL player of all time because of the way that he sent me to tears with that punt return, but he was a damn good player. He had a lot of explosion. He made a lot of dynamic plays. And the Giants, let's be honest, they could use a player like that who can stretch the field and really create a vertical presence in this offense. And we know that the Giants are significantly interested in Jalen Hyatt. They've met with him on more than one occasion, brought him in for a top 30 visit. And let's keep in mind, this guy was the Fred Biletnikoff Award winner for the 2022 season. He lit up the stat sheet this past year for Tennessee, playing over in the SEC. He had a dominant performance against Alabama. He pretty much cooked every cornerback that he went up against in the SEC. And when you're talking about a player performing that well in that conference, that's pretty translatable skill set right there. He's going to be a successful player in the NFL. I do think that he is. I know a lot of analysts like to look at him as a very boom or bust player, and I think that's kind of related to the fact that he's boom or bust if you're looking for a WR1. I don't necessarily think Jalen Hyatt is a WR1, but I do think that he's a player who just adds a level of explosiveness and playmaking ability that the Giants offense completely does not have right now in terms of being a vertical threat. So Jalen Hyatt with 32 overall, I'm just kind of spitballing here. I didn't really even take a look at the board, but if he were available with the 32nd overall pick and the Giants were picking there, I would predict that they would take him. Not even the fact that I would personally do it, but I know that they have a lot of interest in him, and I really do see the way that he could fit into this offense. Give Daniel Jones something that he's never had, and that's an absolute burner who can take the top off of the defense. So Jalen Hyatt, I think, would also be a very solid pick with 32 overall. Again, you have Emmanuel Forbes there. There's a few cornerbacks that I like. I like DJ Turner out of Michigan. 32 overall might be a little early for him, but let's also throw out some other names. Linebacker Trenton Simpson out of Clemson. Giants fans would love to have him there, and screw it, man. If the Giants went with John Michael Schmitz with the 32nd overall pick and didn't make the elaborate trade up to 37, I think that would be a very sound spot to take that center out of Michigan there, or Minnesota there as well. But Alex, I'll let you get your take on what you would do with the 32nd overall pick after trading down, and kind of give me your take on why you think Emmanuel Forbes could be a fit.
Yeah, look, the reality is Emmanuel Forbes, lanky, long, he kind of would be that perfect ball hawk corner, that CB2 that's aggressive. He can, had more interceptions than any Power 5 cornerback since 2020 with 13 over the last 3 years. He's an absolute aggressive monster when it comes to looking at the football, reading the quarterback's eyes, and jumping those routes. So if you're looking for a guy that's going to create turnovers and is going to be extremely aggressive, he's a great fit, especially in a Wink Martindale defense. I think that he would be pretty fun to watch, but there are a ton of other players that could be in the mix there. Like you mentioned a few, Trenton Simpson at linebacker. If he was sitting there, athletic freak paired with Bobby Okereke, that would be a sick combination at linebacker. That would be a position that we have solved for the next 3, 4, 5 years at the very least. So linebacker's been a big liability for us, and Wink Martindale's defense needs to be able to stop the run. We went out and got Nunez Roche, and adding another linebacker to the mix here. And we really like Darian Beavers, and Micah McFadden has some potential, but he's coming off an ACL tear. Beavers is. So what can we really expect from him as a 6th-round pick out of Cincinnati last year? I'm not expecting a lot, but I do think he's a good developmental player, good depth piece. Having another starter there like Trenton Simpson, who they could really just expand upon his athleticism, ask him to rush the passer, would be sick. So if they landed him at 32, whatever it might be, that would be sick. That would be a great option for the Giants. If they went out after John Michael Schmitz at 32, that would be fine as well, because you still have that extra 80th overall pick. But the whole concept of this was that I don't think Schmidt is going to be there beyond like 40. So I had the Giants using that 80th pick that they acquired from the Pittsburgh Steelers and then trading up with the Seattle Seahawks, who love to trade their picks around. They love to move back. They love to get more capital. So you target them as a potential option. Say, okay, we know they don't like to stick around here. We know they like to move back. We'll give them a nice chunk of quality, 57 and 80. They add a really valuable 3rd-round selection, and we get our starting solution at center for the next 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. You know what I mean? You get your guy. You get an elite level player at the position in this specific draft class in context. So you're looking at a solution at center for the long term, which helps Daniel Jones and protects your $160 million investment, $92 million guaranteed, $81 million guaranteed at signing. You protect your guy. You protect him. You give him a center that's very smart. He's very solid, very good fundamentals, a lot of upside. The NFL believes he will be a top or at least an above average starter by his 2nd season. So you're getting a guy who's going to be good in the NFL, at least by most accounts. Now, the other pick, as we mentioned before, 32, could go in multiple different directions. B.J. Ojulari. Maybe you go for a pass rusher. Maybe they don't feel as though Azeez Ojulari can be relied upon anymore. 2 years injury prone. Last year was really bad. When he was on the field, the guy was unstoppable, but he couldn't stay healthy. So maybe the Giants say, we need another guy to help him. Why not go get his brother? So B.J. Ojulari could be an option there. The Giants, you can never have enough pass rushers, as we've seen. Pass rushers ultimately do the most damage. Putting pressure on quarterbacks, especially when you're going up against really good offensive lines. Dallas, Eagles twice a year. It's really difficult to face these teams when you don't have adequate pass rushes. So the Giants may want to bolster that position. They could definitely go in that direction. I wouldn't be surprised, but I also think that there's other needs here. Jalen Hyatt, as you mentioned, expands the field. He's got ridiculous speed. He comes from an air raid spread offense with Hendon Hooker. They brought in Hendon Hooker, by the way, for a top 30 visit too. Maybe they're asking him, what do you think about Jalen Hyatt? What do you think about him as a receiver? There's a lot of really good reasons that you bring in Hendon Hooker just to find out what his value is, how his rehab is going, who else has he met with. They're saying that he could be a top 40 pick. Maybe the Giants want to move around. Maybe a team's like, we really want Hooker, and he's there, and the Giants are in the way, and maybe they want to use that pick or trade back and get some value. There's a lot of things that this team can do with information. Information is key. Knowledge is power. Like, that's a general statement. The more knowledge the Giants have about these draft prospects, the better it's going to be for them, because they have the knowledge to say, okay, we know Hendon Hooker's really close to returning to football. We know that he was tremendous last year. We know his personality. We know his character. We've done our due diligence. And if we've seen it, everybody else has too. So in the past, the Giants haven't done their proper due diligence when it comes to quarterbacks because they've been so committed to Daniel Jones. They just signed Daniel Jones to a massive extension, and they're still bringing in Hendon Hooker for a visit. So it says to me that they're trying to figure out all the ways that they can utilize this information, and that's ultimately what good teams do. That's what good organizations do. They use knowledge to their advantage, and they take advantage of every little piece of it. So I'm excited to see what they do on that end, but they could be asking him about Jalen Hyatt, like as you mentioned before, really good player. Is he the best wide receiver in this draft class? Absolutely not. Does he have the potential to be a very good receiver in the NFL? Absolutely. He's got tremendous speed. He's a really great route runner. Now, he definitely played in a system that favored wide receivers, gave him a lot of time, gave him a lot of space to work with, and Hendon Hooker surely took advantage of it. But there's a lot of developmental room for him. So I would love to see what the Giants could do with a fast, speedy player like that on the boundary, because he is more of a boundary guy, and the Giants could use another X receiver. So I think that would be a really good benefit for them. Do you think that if they were at 32, and a lot of people are down on the wide receiver class this year, do you think if they were at 32, you'd prefer they go corner or receiver if you had to choose between those two?
I'm going to go cornerback because I think that the top end talent for the cornerbacks is probably better than the top end talent of the wide receivers. So the likelihood of one of those guys falling into the second round and still being a true round one player is higher than it is for a round two player. Now, I know that with my mock draft pick, I did just go wide receiver Jalen Hyatt, but that's because I know that the Giants are super interested in him. So it was kind of predictive there by me. I think that if he were on the board and they traded down to 32, he would be a favorable option for the Giants. They seem interested in him. Plus, I do think that the value is there. I personally think that Jalen Hyatt is an early second round player, so I would take him there. That makes sense to me. But if one of those cornerbacks that's supposed to go in round one falls into round two, the likelihood of them being a round one grade for the Giants and all of these other NFL teams is much higher, because if you do all of the reading and research, analysts, executives, they're saying that there's not many round one grades being handed out to wide receivers this year. Some teams only have 1 to 2 round one grades for wide receivers, and then those other guys, they're not even round one. Maybe they're only round two grades, and maybe even some, for all we know, around 3 grades. Guys like Jordan Addison, who some of us think, and at one point I believed was the best wide receiver in this class, some teams don't even have a round 1 grade on him, which might surprise some people. But if you take a look at his pretty subpar combine performance, an injury hampered and kind of underwhelming 2022 season, I guess it makes some sense, right? So a lot of these wide receivers, it's not like last year or the years prior where we've had players. I mean, if you're thinking back to the season where, the offseason where like Jamar Chase was coming out and it was just a loaded wide receiver class of talent. That's not really what this is. There's a lot of wide receivers that people think will go in the first round because it's a need across the league. Getting wide receiver talent on your team is of the utmost importance now, because that's kind of the way that the NFL game is shifting in terms of positional value. But when you're looking at it, there's not really that many true number one wide receivers in the first round of this draft, but there are with cornerbacks. So if the Giants are picking with that first pick in the second round, I think that cornerback likely has the higher end talent available on the draft board. So I would want to go in that direction. However, I would not be upset either with a wide receiver or a corner. I think that both of those positions are massive needs for the Giants. I know they did a good amount to upgrade their offense this offseason, right? They added some wide receivers. They extended Darius Slayton. They signed Paris Campbell, and they brought in Darren Waller, who has the ability to be a wide receiver one in your offense from the tight end position, right? The Giants did all of that, but that's not to say that Darren Waller wouldn't benefit from playing alongside a dominant wide receiver one, and that wide receiver one wouldn't benefit from playing alongside Darren Waller. You could add a whole nother element to this offense if you add even more receiving talent. But on the same token, look at that defense. Who is playing alongside Adoree Jackson right now? And so, Alex, I guess I'm curious to hear your take on it. Do you prioritize wide receiver or do you prioritize cornerback? Because we know how game-changing a wide receiver prospect being drafted and having overnight success could be for this team. But we also know how huge of a need cornerback 2 is, knowing that it's Adoree Jackson and then pretty much a bunch of roster fighting guys fighting for roster spots, fighting for playing time right behind Adoree Jackson.
So I think that I'm a little scared right now, because if we don't have Saquon Barkley, our offense is going to hurt. It's going to be a little tough for us because Darren Waller has a pretty serious health history. It's something that has held him back in recent years. I think he's 31 years old. So he's only getting older, and those injuries only become more prevalent as you age. When you look at Saquon Barkley right now, he is refusing to sign the franchise tag. He's going to skip out on voluntary training, which is fine. He's going to skip out on non-voluntary training. He's going to skip out on training camp. He's going to skip out all the way up until the regular season, and he could just not play. He could just say, you know what, I'm not going to risk it. I'll sit out a year, maintain my health. Maybe I'll force the Giants to trade me. If the Giants don't have Saquon Barkley, we lose a massive element. We lose someone who commands attention, and it makes the receiver position ever more prevalent. It makes the idea of drafting a receiver that much more important, because we need another guy who's going to take that attention. We need another guy who's going to help in that facet. So if the Giants are sitting there like, we're not sure that Saquon Barkley is going to be on this team in 2023, they need to go and get another receiver. They need to go and get a guy with wide receiver one upside, and they cannot hesitate to do that because they need it. Darren Waller is not trustworthy at times. His injury history suggests that. So we need some fresh blood. We need some fresh legs. We need a guy who's got that type of potential. and we need him without trading up or trading back for what it's worth. And that's kind of my logic at this point. If the Giants don't think Saquon Barkley is going to be playing for them this upcoming season, they need to sit at 25 and take the best receiver on the board, or even move up a couple spots to get the best guy on their board. That's kind of be what is that it's probably what's going to happen if they're not comfortable with the Saquon situation. But if they think, we'll extend him or we'll get him on a decent deal, or we know he's going to sign, like he's committed, but he's not going to be happy. You have to make some adjustments. Like maybe you go and help Adoree Jackson because he's not under contract for next year. This draft is going to tell us a lot about what the state of this roster looks like, what the future looks like at the running back position, what the future looks like at the wide receiver position. But right now there are some elements that are really concerning me, and I'm not exactly sure how it's going to unfold. But the Giants do have an opportunity to increase and upgrade their offense. They could just say, screw it, let's go get the best wide receiver and best center in the first 2 rounds and just completely go. But I think that they want to support Wink Martindale, so I do think that they're going to use one of those 2 picks on a defensive player. It could be a guy like Jordan Battle out of Alabama in the 2nd round to support at strong safety. They have needs, guys. Like this team has needs. They need a cornerback. They need a strong safety. They need a receiver. They need a center. You could even throw guard into the mix. They have 5 positions that need starting level players now, and we don't have the money to sign them. So guys are going to have to step up. Players are going to have to compete as 4th, 3rd round picks for starting snaps immediately. This team is still building. They're still in the building phases. Next year, we're going to have a lot of cemented starters and a lot of money and some places where we can say, okay, we can afford to spend another draft pick on a receiver. We can afford to spend a top draft pick on this to build out our depth, have elite competition. But right now we're trying to plug positions that are going to be problems. And we don't have enough draft capital. We don't have as many draft picks as we'd like to do that. So trading back makes sense. And maybe you don't even trade up. Maybe you trade back, get another 3rd round pick, and then you take the best player on the board that fits your needs at 32, whatever they trade back to, at 57. And maybe you add another 3rd round pick, so you have 80 and another one. So like maybe you fill in the first 3 rounds of the draft 4 or 5 starting level positions with guys who are just going to have to play them. They're just going to have to compete. So it could happen that way. That could be ultimately how things unfold. But this team is still building the fundamentals, and that's ultimately okay. And we took a big step forward last year. But I am curious to see how they unfold. But right now, to answer your question, I would say really a lot hinges on Saquon Barkley's decision. But right now, I think that going cornerback probably makes the most sense, assuming that Saquon Barkley does play for the Giants this upcoming season.
Yeah, I think that's totally valid. I mean, listen, the whole situation with Saquon Barkley, we'll see how it unfolds. I personally believe that he will play this upcoming season on the franchise tag, but after that, we know that the future is wildly uncertain for Saquon Barkley in terms of wearing a blue jersey and an NY on the side of his helmet. I mean, listen, we'll see how that unfolds, but right now, I do think that a point that you made, the Giants have to go corner or wide receiver very early in this draft. I do believe there's 3 positions that they need to address in the first 3 rounds if they're drafting for need. I mean, listen, if they go best player available and Brian Branch is sitting there at 25, they might go ahead, take him, safety out of Alabama. That could be your day 1 starter alongside Xavier McKinney. That makes sense. But if you're going by needs and you're going to address the biggest needs on this roster, the Giants have to address wide receiver, cornerback, and center within the first 3 rounds, in my opinion. So pretty much all of the mock drafts that I throw out there, and of course we're going to be hitting you with another one tomorrow, so stay tuned to that. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. But all the mock drafts that I throw out there, it's going to be addressing those 3 needs in the first 3 rounds. But of course, I want to hear your thoughts on that down below in the comment section. What position do you want the Giants to address in rounds 1, rounds 2, rounds 3? What is your idea about trading down from the first round to collect more draft assets and of course target some players in the early 2nd round? Let us know down below in the comment section. And again, make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. We will catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.